The Color of My Words by Lynn Joseph, illustrated by Joe Cepeda. 12-year-old Ana Rosa lives in the Dominican Republic, at a time when free speech is censored by the government. Ana Rosa's only notebook is used for school, so she secretly writes her own stories and poems on any paper she can find, paper bags, napkins, and even her brother Guario's notepad for taking orders at a restaurant. Her mother is the one person in the village who knows about her dream of becoming a writer, until one day everything changes. The Grigri Tree. I like to sit high in my Grigri Tree, where I can survey all below me. On top of the Grigri, I'm a strong, dark queen, sitting on a throne of towering green. I hold the leaves close as the wind blows past, I kiss the raindrops as the thunder blasts. I'm the Grigri queen, and I'm in command, protecting my tree from careless hands, alone with a treasure no one else sees, hidden from the world and all who seek me. No one had to point out that I was different from everyone else in our village. It was clear from the first day I began climbing the Grigri tree and staying up there for hours. "What's wrong with your daughter?" neighbors asked Mammy. "She's not right in her head," they answered themselves, when Mammy only shrugged her shoulders. Papi would say, "Nothing wrong with sitting in a tree. It's the same as sitting on a porch, except it's higher." Roberto would climb up with me sometimes, but he got bored quickly and swung down, yelling like a monkey. Angela shook her head at me and said I would never be a real chica because chicas do not climb trees when they are 12 years old. Not even Guario understood, although he tried. He asked me once what I did up there. That was more than anyone else had ventured to inquire. I told him I looked around. He asked if I didn't think I was wasting a lot of time when I could be doing something to prepare for my future, such as studying English. Guario always had his mind on the future. Sometimes I think that he was tormented by all of us who didn't particularly care what tomorrow was going to bring. And really, what was there to know? Either it would rain or it would not. But it was definitely going to be hot, and Mommy was going to cook, and Papi was going to sit on the porch, and the radio was going to play merengues all day. That was for sure. Besides, I already knew what I wanted to do in my future. I wanted to be a writer, but only Mommy knew that. If I told Guario, he would say I was unreasonable. If I told anyone else, they would laugh. But in my Grigri tree, I could be anything I wanted to be, even a writer with words for everything I saw from my leafy green hideout. I could see the ocean glittering silver in the sunlight. I could see people trudging along the dusty road from Susa, some balancing buckets of water on their heads. I could see boys playing baseball in the schoolyard with a tree branch bat and a rubber band ball. I could see the river, meandering over rocks, hungry for rain. Far off in Puerto Plata, I could see Mount Isabel de Torres, a green giant with misty white curls dancing round her head. I could see the sleepy lagoon and the sad little homes of the lagoon people. I could see the birds that flew past my Grigri, their ruby and gold velvet feathers shimmering on their tiny bodies. I could see the rainbows that glowed in the sea sky after a rain passed. I could count the sunset roses in Senora Garcia's backyard. I could see my teacher climbing the hill near her house, and I could see Papi sitting on our porch, nodding off to sleep. Then one day I saw something that I had never seen before, and I was so scared that I almost fell out of the tree. There I was, looking at the sea, when suddenly out of it rose a giant monster, tall and black and covering the sun with its shadow. Before I could scream, the monster fell back into the sea. I scrambled down the tree quickly and ran toward my house, shouting, "Papi, there's a monster in the sea!" Papi woke up from his siesta. "¿Qué pasa?" "A monster," I repeated, "a giant sea monster, and it's coming this way." I shouted inside the house. "Mommy, come quick! There's a monster in the sea. I saw it." Mommy came outside, and Angela followed her. They were drying their hands from washing the lunch dishes. Everyone looked at me as if I were crazy. "It's true," I said, jumping up and down. Mommy made me sit down and describe exactly what I saw. Before I had finished, Angela shouted my news to her best friend walking by. Then Poppy waved over some of his domino-playing amigos and told them what I saw from on top of my Grigri tree. Soon our porch was surrounded with people all asking me to tell my story again. When I had told it for the 4th time, Señor Garcia, the Calmado owner, began to laugh. "You must have fallen asleep in the tree and had a bad dream, Carino," he said. "No," I replied, shaking my head. "I saw it." But his words had relieved everyone's fears of a sea monster. "Yes," they agreed, "you must have imagined it." I wanted to shout. I didn't imagine anything, but I kept quiet because Mommy and Poppy would not like it if I shouted at the neighbors. That was for sure. As everyone sat down on the porch to share a drink and talk about my sea monster, I slipped away and ran to my Grigri tree. I heard Mommy calling me, but I pretended I didn't hear and climbed up the tree fast. I needed to find out if what I had seen would come back again. I sat down on my usual branch and tucked a few leaves away from my eyes. Then I stared at the sea. I looked so hard and for so long that its blueness filled up my eyeballs and I had to blink a lot so I wouldn't go blind. The afternoon faded into evening and the sea's blueness turned gray. I watched and waited. My stomach made grumbling noises, but I covered them with my hand. Then, just as I began to think that maybe I had imagined it after all, I saw a splash of white water. The splash of water rose up, until it was high in the air like a magic fountain. "It's a volcano," I whispered. I remembered that my teacher had told us how many of the Caribbean islands had been formed by volcanoes that rose out of the sea. I gasped. Maybe I was seeing the beginning of a brand new island right next to the República Dominica. As I kept looking, a black shape emerged out of the fountain of water. It rose and turned as if doing a dance, and that's when I saw the gleaming white throat of the sea monster. It hovered in between heaven and ocean for a few seconds, and then fell back into the water with a splash that sprayed salt drops as high as the pearl-pink clouds. My heart beat furiously, and I steadied myself so I wouldn't fall down from the tree. I was right. I had not imagined anything. There really was a sea monster out there, but this time I didn't rush down to tell anyone. What would the people do, I wondered? Would they try to find it, or maybe kill it? Somehow, although I didn't know why, I could tell that the sea monster was not dangerous. It just wanted to swim and splash and jump out of the sea the same way I jumped out over the waves. I climbed down the tree and went home. The first thing I wanted to do was eat, but people were all over the porch talking wildly. "We saw it, Anna Rosa," they shouted. "We saw that big sea monster of yours." Poppy was busy handing out glasses, cups, and small jars. Mommy was passing around a plate of dolces, the sweet milk candy that I love. She must have just made them because they were still warm and soft. Children were carrying huge plates filled with different foods that their mothers had made. Angela was directing them to put the food here or there on our big table. I saw plates piled high with arroz con pollo, platanos fritos, and batatas fritas. Señor Garcia apologized over and over to me. About 100 people were gathered on our porch, in the yard, and along the roadside, talking about the sea monster. "The tourist high season is coming," said Señor Rojas. We owned a jeep that he rented to tourists. "We can't let anyone know we have a sea monster hanging around Susa Bay." "But why not?" asked Señora Perez, who sold paintings on the beach. "It could be a tourist attraction. Plenty people may decide to come here just to see it." Half the folks whispered, "He's right," and the other half said, "She's the one who's right." It looked as if we were going to have a big debate on our porch, just like the ones that take place when it is a presidential election year. The way that everyone was carrying on, soon we would have people writing merengues about the sea monster, and there would be sea monster fiestas all over the place, just like during elections. I shook my head and just listened to everyone as I ate a plate heaped high with food. That poor sea monster, I thought. Then the people began to make a plan. When Dominicans get together and decide to make a plan, watch out, because there are plans, and then there are plans, and this was definitely a plan. The first thing the people decided was that someone had to keep watch over the sea monster. Well, everyone looked around to see who would volunteer. That's when we knew the plan would not work, because no one wanted to do something so stupid as to go down to the sea and watch for the sea monster. It was Angela who got the bright idea that since I saw it first, I could keep watch over it from my Grigri tree. Everyone turned to me and nodded their heads. Finally, a good reason for her to be up there all the time, I heard Senora Garcia whisper. Papi was looking at me and nodding his head, proud that his daughter was selected for such an important job. I said, okay, I would do it. Then the plan continued. Half the people wanted to make signs and announce that Susa Bay had a new visitor and it was a one-of-a-kind sea monster. The other half of the crowd shook their heads and said, no, it was too obvious. We must be subtle about a delicate matter like this, said Senora Perez. We must make up a wonderful story about this sea monster, give it a name, make it a friendly monster, and then tell the world. Otherwise, all we will do is scare everyone away from this side of the island. She had a point. A story about the sea monster was much better than a big billboard with an arrow pointing this way to sea monster of Susa Bay. The idea of it all made me giggle. Wait until Guario came home and heard all this. I could hardly wait for him to return from the restaurant. Well, said Senor Rojas, what will we name the sea monster? And who knows how to write a story about it anyway? Asked Senor Garcia. Senora Perez shrugged her shoulders. I don't know how to write too good, but we could make up something. Then Mommy, who was usually quiet during these kinds of discussions, spoke up loud and clear. Ana Rosa would be the best person to write a story about the sea monster. I was shocked. This wasn't the same Mommy who worshipped silence. People began to shake their heads. A child to do something so important, they whispered. Yes, said Mommy. Let us give her a notebook to write in, and she will write us a story about the sea monster. If we don't like it, someone else can try. The way Mommy said it, so definite and firm, made people nod their heads in agreement. Well, it doesn't hurt to let her try, they said. So Senor Garcia went and brought back a notebook from his colmado. Mommy gave it to me, and her hands were cold like the river. While the grown-ups stayed up late on the porch talking and drinking and eating, I went inside and began to write a story about the sea monster. First I tried to give him a name, but I couldn't think of a good one, so instead I thought about what he looked like. Then I imagined what he must feel like living all alone in the sea, different from all the other sea creatures. The fish and animals in the ocean were probably afraid of his huge size and his big nose and long swishing tail, and they probably didn't want to play with him. Maybe they whispered about how strange he looked, but the sea monster wanted a friend. Deep down, I understood exactly how the sea monster must feel. I began to write. I wrote page after page in the notebook the people had given to me, and when I was finished, it was almost midnight. I went to the porch. Everyone was still there, laughing and talking, and some were dancing to the music on the radio. Children were asleep on their mothers' and fathers' laps. Some of the bigger children were sprawled out on a blanket on the floor, and the merengue music was a background lullaby for them. When the people saw me, they got quiet. Someone turned off the radio. Some woke the children on their laps. Papi moved from his chair and put his arm around my shoulders. He led me to the front of the porch.